Take your CJ7 all the way to 11. Jeepin' with Cool Guy.
Now that we've taken it apart and refurbished all the pieces on the fresh air intake, we're going to put it back together. Let me show you what I did. Took all the plastic components, basically the main housing, spray painted it with Rust-Oleum High Performance flat black. It's got a nice look to it. All the pieces, flaps, lines, mounting brackets, everything that was just pure metal has been powder coated, sandblasted and powder coated. Soaked all the plastic washers in purple power, so there's no stain, no tarnish on them. Other than being yellow, they look brand new. I took the springs and I did heat oil treatment to it. It's where you heat the metal up to about 500 degrees and you dip it into used motor oil, and it provides this pretty much waterproof coating, rust-proof coating for the life of the piece. Two flaps. What I did was sandblasted both of these, soaked them in the purple power, and got the flaps real nice and pliable. Got all the tarnish off of them, so these are actually in great shape. And then once I had sandblasted them, I taped them off so that I didn't sandblast the rubber. But I just primed it using auto primer, and then 2 or 3 coats of the Rust-Oleum High Performance flat black. Pretty much got everything covered, so this should be permanent. Hopefully it'll never rust out again. I think it looks really good. Now with all that said, let's start putting it back together. We're going to start with resistor coil, heater coil. Let's move back into the world of let's do this the right way. Put this on the outside of the air intake with the heating coil on the inside. You could do this with a drill or an impact wrench or something like that, but really, in all honesty, you're dealing with plastic. Let's not strip these things out and get out your screwdriver. That's really good. Next, we're going to start with the brackets. One of the complications is I'm replacing pretty much everything on here with aluminum pop rivets. So I had to find a pop rivet that would fit through this tiny hole and also be big enough to fit through, or once it actually pulls up on itself, hopefully big enough to hold within that large drilled out hole. Let's see if this 35-year-old plastic can hold up to a pop rivet. Looks like it. Sweet! Next we're going to put on the main bracket. And as you can see, the holes that are actually in the plastic housing are pretty well worn. These things had cracked through, so when I took the rivet out, the rivet was just spinning and it didn't help a whole lot. So what I'm going to have to do, I'm going to have to put a stainless steel washer on the back side and pull the rivet through so that this winds up becoming the backer plate. Looks like that's going to hold up. Not a whole lot to this. There's a flat spot on this post that goes against the backside, if you want to call it that, of here. So you want to pair up the flat side with this. Once you get it through the hole on the backside, pivot point right here, this is a simple addition of one of the tension clamps. That should go right over the top of that. Then simply take your spring, go through that hole, Grab a pair of needle nose pliers, just to make it easier on your hands, and span it over the top of that little notch. And there, that is now in place. I've already put together the assembly for this, just so I can remember how to do it. It's a little more complicated. There's a lot of washers involved. Essentially, what you do is you start off with the... Okay, I just totally defeated the purpose of all that. Great. This piece slides into this slot here, and this pin goes into this slot and it rides along. Then after that, this piece goes into the main housing. As we're doing that, I'm going to make sure that you slide it through the main piece here. Again, this also has a flat spot that goes against the flat spot of this. Well, this is a lot more difficult than I anticipated. I'm finding that reassembling this is a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be, so bear with me. When you're putting this main pivot post through and attaching it to your flap, make sure that this pin comes through this main gap, because that's essentially what your pivot line is. And that's what I was having difficulty with. Moving on, apply another washer. Get these closely aligned, and then this pivot point lines up with that. So you have kind of an overlap. Another washer there on top of that one. And then you put tension washer on top here to hold this lever in place. And you put a tension washer over the top of this pin to keep all of those components together. Once you have all the washers in place and the tension washers in place, then you use the spring to finish up the assembly. Long end goes connected to the bottom part of the bracket. Short end gets connected to the top part of the lever. There. So after much deliberation, I run this thing through a dry fit just to make sure everything was lining up. I've decided to go with the iron grip silicone adhesive. I could put butyl tape on here, but I think that I'm going to have some adhesion problems or connection problems with some of the rivets that I drill, and I'm going to need as much connection as I possibly can get. Now really, this is a fresh air intake, so I don't need that much of a seal behind it. I just want to make sure that this thing holds up permanently. I'm going to run a decent sized caulk line, but nothing too big, nothing too heavy. Okay, I've run a bead all the way around the edge, stayed away from the joints, where I want to make sure it doesn't bleed over into the flap. That wouldn't be good. Now the real challenge is to get this thing on here smoothly without smearing the adhesive all over the place. Let me get this right. So I think at this point what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a couple rivets. Just drill the holes, add the rivets in just the places that I need them to clamp this down. And then once it dries, which would be in about 4 or 5 hours, then I'll go back and I'll add all the other rivets. Well, it seems to have held. That's a pretty decent look. Just finished up the rivets. Made some tactical errors. My one piece of advice would be, if you're going to do this and you're going to replace all of the rivets and you're going to take the whole thing apart, make sure that you've got a game plan going into it. Since I had put the adhesive on there, I had to go through and start drilling some of the rivet holes, but I hadn't taken into account the width of the plastic, and I made a couple errors. So, like for example, on this piece right here, I had forgotten to put the metal bracket that runs through here. This thing just floats, but there's a little notch in there, and I had put a large rivet in there which I wasn't very happy with, so I actually had to drill that out. So now I've got this big gaping hole there, but I guess it's really no different than some of the other spots. When it comes right down to it, this is more of a functional fix. I've got everything sealed up. I've got brand new aluminum rivets all the way through. All of the hinges work great. The springs are all treated, so nothing is going to get through here. It's pretty much waterproof because of the sealant, and everything has been rust-proof. So I'm kind of excited about that. It just doesn't look beautiful, but you'll never see this because it's up underneath the cowl. Almost last step is to install this rod, the connector rod. So it goes from here into this point here. You can see that there's a lot more bend in one side than the other. The one that has more of the Z, or the, I guess you could say S maybe, goes towards the smaller flap over here. And all you have to do is just slide these both in like that. Take one of your tension washers, put it on the back side of both of them. Realized I got a little overzealous with the application of the tension washers. We don't want to connect the connecting rod to this hinge just yet, because we need to be able to put the sheet metal screw into here, the mounting bracket, for the connecting cable. So you want to shift these out of the way, obviously disconnect this, and then you take your new stainless steel number 10 sheet metal screw, screw that down into here. Once that's screwed all the way down and in, then you can apply, or you can put your connecting rod through here, put the wire, the cable on the other side, and then you push your tension washer onto that, and you have them now connected. And there we have it, your reassembly of your fresh air intake. Nice job. I think you did a great job. I'm very proud of you. You've worked very hard up to this point. See the next episode? If you haven't watched all the other videos that I've posted, go ahead. You might learn something. I learned something tonight. This is a Harbor Freight pop rivet tool. Had no idea what these different pieces were for. Well, I figured out that they all have different widths, and each one of them fits different rivets. Wow, epiphany. Who knew? But hey, like I said, I learned something tonight.